Berserk, Millennium Falcon, and Seima Senki no Sho, or Berserk, Millennium Empire Arc, Chapter of the Holy Demon War. A game I was led to play by my impulsive completionism and a need to consume product. I recently got caught up with the Berserk manga, and while I will not be reviewing that due to the fact that it's still ongoing, I decided to play and review instead this PS2 game that never came out in the West. First, an explanation. I played this game on an emulator, so I could both capture footage, but also because of a modded ISO that had an English translation of the text, making it playable for someone like me who doesn't know Japanese. That being said, I think playing this game in its original Japanese form would not be impossible even if you don't know the language, as long as you know the controls, but more on that later. Also, something I have to address is you might see some visual oddities in the video. This is due to me again recording the gameplay at a higher resolution and doing it on hardware mode on the emulator, which leads to these visual glitches. But in software mode it looks just fine, of course with the drawback of not being able to play at a higher resolution. So be aware of that if you're thinking of emulating this game. Now, I'm sure there could be a way of playing this translated version on the original PS2, via jailbreaking and homebrewing, I'm sure, but I'm not the one you should ask on this matter, as anyone that saw the Silent Hill video knows what my PS2 looks like. PS, don't watch the Silent Hill video. Usually in a review like this I would avoid talking spoilers, but given that this is sort of an adaptation of the Holy Evil War chapter of the Falcon of the Millennium Empire arc, where you only see events through the perspective of Guts, I would really hope that this is not the way you experience this arc for the first time. Still, a warning, I'll be spoiling things that happen up until volume 27 of the Berserk manga. I cannot speak to the anime as I'm not aware of how much that has covered so far, as I have not watched it yet. But I will in the future, wink wink. Now on to the actual review. Berserk, Millennium Falcon, Hen Seima Senki no Sho. I'm sorry if I pronounced that wrong, and because of that I will now be calling it Berserk on the PS2. Well, Berserk on the PS2 is an action hack and slash video game made by Yokes, who you might know for literally every freaking wrestling game. While I have played some of these games as a kid at friends' houses and such, I've always thought that they were fun, but never enough to get the games for myself. And I'm not big into the WWE or any of its contemporaries, so I can't say I have played any of these games in recent years. So my expectations for this game were pretty blank. And well, this game is really cool and really lazy at the same time. The way it looks to me, and this is just a theory, is that the devs put a whole lot of work and budget into Guts and his gameplay and the bosses, and then they were left on a pretty tight budget to make the rest of the game. Let me explain. Guts in this game moves like you'd imagine him to move. From the manga, his sword is heavy and it makes tons of damage. You're slicing enemies in half, cutting limbs off, and it's all really smooth, and attacks lead from each other. For example, if you swing your sword, the sword will stay where it was swing, and from that point it will continue to swing. It's actually pretty advanced for the time. Not only does it add a sense of realism, but also a weight to the sword that Guts would not just reset to the standard pose while using a sword like that. It honestly puts to shame a lot of hack and slashes to this day with this level of detail and fluidity on Guts' part. Now, this is all great, but what about the enemies? And here is where the game starts to falter. While there is a big variety of monsters, and we even get to see, of course, an enemy that was very prevalent in this arc, the trolls. But they all somewhat feel the same. They're all sort of just blood bags to be cut away in an almost Destiny Warriors type of gameplay. Ironic, given who would eventually develop a Berserk game. Not all monsters spray blood, but when they do, be sure that guts will be covered in it. Which is a cool detail, but can also make the gameplay look somewhat messy, especially when the types of enemies they'll be attacking at any given time will look all sorta very similar due to whatever setting the level takes place on. And this feeling of enemies feeling like pushovers is only made worse by the level design. While the levels are big and open, they are also very bland, just forest levels that take you on long fetch quest missions where enemies just keep on spawning. I'm not joking, enemies just never stop spawning. The devs definitely took the meaning of the mark a little bit too seriously. Enemies just spawn endlessly in every level except for boss fights. It can become very repetitive and boring, given that most of the time these are not very challenging to fight, as most of them die in one hit, and have a tendency to gang up on you and surrounding you, but not really attack you. Again, much like Warriors game, this combat is made even easier by Guts' moveset. While his attacks can be somewhat slow and heavy at the beginning, it's still rather easy as he has a block and parry move that can cancel his attack animation. Also, the window for parrying is big and forgiving, enough that I had no problem spamming the parry button, meaning this game was pretty easy even when they removed some of your abilities. Which leads me to talk a little bit more about the technical side of this game. There is an XP system where you gain XP by defeating enemies, but something you'll notice is most monsters give really low amounts of XP. I'm talking like 2 XP when the cheapest upgrade costs 7500 XP. So what's going on? Is this game that grindy? Well, no and yes. No, because there is a way around this. Making big combos where meaning one combo means one kill, which in this game is fine given that most enemies die in one hit. That gives you exponentially more XP, and that's how you're supposed to do it. But, and this may be a personal thing, I still felt that this was very grindy. In my opinion, if you're deciding to play this game, invest in speed of your character attacks. And maybe ignore the arrows and kunais. I felt like they were pretty much useless in the gameplay, as the arrows never do enough damage even when fully upgraded, and the kunais, while they stun the enemy, this never felt like something I actually needed to do, especially while having a parry mechanic. You can also upgrade your allies, which I have not mentioned yet. While they will not show up in the battle, you can summon them to give you some sort of power or some sort of attack. You get Puck, who heals you, Shriek, that gives you more defense, Isidro does a flame area attack, presumably from the flame sword he gets around that time, and Serpico stops time? Yeah, fair to say, I'm not a huge fan of these. They definitely feel like they could have been more appropriate or at least more flashy. All of these are just either stats or area effects type of attacks, and that's kinda boring. The fact that they almost never show up as actual player models in the game makes it extra disappointing. And at this point in Guts' journey, he has gotten a whole crew, but the game is playing like he's still the loner of older times. Now, going back to the levels, not all of them are bland, specifically the ones that have direct correlation to the story of Berserk. Places where actually big plot moments happen actually get a lot more attention and detail, but again, they're bogged down by the same mission structures of the previous levels. To put it in an easy way to understand, it's almost like every level follows the same formula. Go from A to B. When you reach B, realize you cannot progress. Then go get/save/kill an objective somewhere between A and B and come back, and in between that fight infinite hordes of monsters as you try to move around the map. And when you do get to any objective, regardless of what the objective was, usually means fighting more of the same enemies, except this time in a more enclosed environment and, well, not endlessly, but still oddly long. The story of the game definitely doesn't help in this regard. Yeah, doing the things in the actual story is cool, but the in-between moments of the character's travel, which make up the biggest portion of the game, have no real help or motivation from the story. But the story itself is alright. It is a retelling of Guts when he meets what is his current team in the manga. And some of the best set pieces that would fit in a video game are in this arc, like the church protecting story or when Griffith's army of demons invades Flora's house. And these are in this game and they're really amazing. But they also add Charles. This is a character exclusive to this game, meaning he's not canon, and he's alright. He's supposed to be the main villain of the video game. Really, he kind of exists to put you in situations that just don't happen during this time in the manga. And it honestly feels like they don't fully commit to it. It would have been cool if they went in on it and maybe have Guts relive some other iconic fights, but in the end, you end up just fighting some old teammates a few times. Well, maybe a few too many times. Overall, it's okay. Like I mentioned, this is not the way you should experience this story for the first time. But people who are already fans of the manga, it is cool to relive these moments in video game form. But I have left the best for last. I will now talk about the absolute best part of this game, leaving this on a positive note. At the beginning I mentioned the boss fights and then I never brought it up again. So here it is, the best part of this video game. This truly makes you feel like the Guts. One-on-one fights, mostly, where you are parrying and cutting their limbs off. They are so brutal and so fluid, with unique parrying animations for both Guts and the bosses, as they can parry you as well. And they're grand, some of them having multiple stages. Well, because apostles. For example, while fighting Zod, he will go into demon form and you can cut his arm off, which he will then pick up and either try to put it back on or hit you with it. There is so much detail here. Bosses is also where most of the challenge of the game will be. And they're also where you will actually have to think a bit more rather than just blindly slashing away. And the game wants you to pull out these flashy parrying moves, and these are the attacks that will take out most health from bosses, while basic attacks, even when upgraded, will only chip at their health, depending on the difficulty of course. These are, in my opinion, so good that they almost save the rest of the game. The final hours of this about 10-hour game are pure boss battles. And it's seriously the best part of the game. It's clear the devs knew the strong suit of what makes this game good, and they definitely reward you for putting up with the rest of the game. There is also a treasure box, which has challenges, which allows you to fight the bosses individually rather than having to play through the game again. Again, these devs definitely knew what were the strong suits of this game. Now, a more difficult question is, do I recommend this game? Well, the gameplay is simple enough that anyone could play as long as they look up the controls. So even if you don't know how to play the translated version, you could still play the original version. Also, maybe only give this one a try if you're a Berserk fan. I think a lot of what the payoff I got from the bosses also came from, well, me having some attachment to these characters. So it's hard for me to know if someone who'd never read or watched Berserk would feel the same level of excitement I get for fighting Zod. And that is it. That's my review of Berserk for the PS2. I hope you enjoyed watching. I hope I conveyed my sentiments on this game clearly. It is an alright game with some strong bits and some not so strong bits. I hope you enjoyed watching, and please subscribe, like, because I think that helps, and comment, I think that helps too, and I would love to know your opinion. Thank you. Woo.